Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Friday, October 10th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Hope you're doing well and had a great week. Well, it's been a kind of fun week around here with coffee and the show and all the things we do at Chief Sports Network. Don't forget today, four quarter Friday. Steve and Justin will get you ready for a very good Friday night of high school football. At Burns Gaffney game is one I'll have my eye on, of course, being a Burns Rebel and all that. They're going to have Cole Bryson in, I think the voice of the Rebels, to talk about that game today. Cole does a great job up there in the upstate. Be sure to check that out live at 9 a.m. You can get the archive on YouTube right here if you like high school football in our state. And we're going to continue to expand that and hopefully have more high school football stuff. We also have streams on the app available. That Burns Gaffney game will be on there. We'll have the schedule for you on the preview show. Speaking of the preview show, lots of folks in today. The late night Gamecock, Matt Anderson, John Strickland, Michael Flint, Chef Will Turner, Rafael Esparza. We could have Glenn Gilbo. He did not get in for our LSU segment yesterday. Technical issues there. I've had a few of those this week on the morning show, but going to try to get Glenn in for a minute and talk about the games this weekend. Really looking forward to talking to Rafael today, live from Las Vegas or New Orleans. For those of you that are heading down, I know some of you are staying in New Orleans and all that good stuff, but he kind of goes back and forth. But really curious about this line. FanDuel has it at 8.5. It's 9.5 according to ESPN Bet. I hadn't checked Caesars, which is what I use. But 8.5, 9.5, it's kind of going back and forth this week for the Gamecocks and LSU. But we'll preview the game, give some predictions at the end. It's always a fun show to get in. Jamie has some great stats and does a great job setting up the weekend for you. Then later tonight, of course, our team streams on the Chief Sports app. Also, the South Carolina High School Football Scoreboard Show, Sports Talk tonight, also will be streaming live. Tomorrow morning, the Tailgate Show at 9:15 with Mad Dog and myself. It's the only musical show that we have here on the Chief Sports Network. Rooster Rant on Sunday. Probably will not. We'll probably move that to Monday. Alex is coming back from Baton Rouge. Matt's on a family vacation. So probably try to fit that in Monday. But then SEC Sunday night, of course, will be along to get you through your weekend and to recap what should be a great weekend of football around the SEC. Boy, you got Missouri, Alabama, you got Texas, Oklahoma, you got Auburn, Georgia, you got Florida, Texas A&M, you got the Gamecocks and LSU. Tennessee plays Arkansas. Ole Miss plays Washington State. But it's a pretty solid SEC schedule this weekend, and they're going to be that way, I think, for a while when it comes to big games with big teams each and every weekend. That's what you sign up for in the SEC. But Rob and Craig will have sort of a recap for you on all that. So that's the schedule for today. Here on Chief Sports, Fridays are always a very good day to kind of get out the content and stuff, especially when the Gamecocks have a game. Last Friday, not so much. So the second injury report came out last night, and Shane Beamer, South Carolina's head coach, talked about it on Carolina Calls a little bit. Good news, bad news for the Gamecocks. Miles Norwood's been upgraded to probable. Boy, Miles got beat on a long pass. I hadn't talked about it. Macklin from Kentucky had about 3 or 4 steps on him. That would have been a touchdown with a better throw. So you got to be careful against LSU because Garrett Nussmeier, assuming he's on, and it's not like he hadn't been completing passes. I mean, those guys, receiver for LSU in man coverage, if they get back, like they're probably playing Tiger Rag. And the place is going crazy. So be careful, Miles, if you get in that situation. He's been upgraded to probable. Troy Pikes, defensive tackle, upgraded to probable. That's good from a depth perspective on the defensive line. Carolina's going to need to play well there. And Troy has been playing well this year. He's flashed in a couple of spots. He's got a couple of years left, too. I think I think he's going to end up being a very interesting player for the Gamecocks in the future. And obviously, Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy's not been on this list. He was banged up before the Kentucky game, played 13 snaps in that one. So he'll be good to go. Um, and that's good. Carolina needs him. Defensive tackle play is kind of a key that I've been focusing on, folks, because you know what Nussmeier does well? He'll step up in the pocket. When you got to have your D tackles right there. TJ Sanders and those talking those guys did a good job last year, not letting him break up through the middle with a sneaky little run or step up and make a pass. You know, I thought for the most part, especially early in last year's game, they did that, and that was a much better offensive line. So, but a lot of new players, you know, battling on both sides on LSU's offensive line and Carolina's D line. The bad news is Marky Anderson was already declared out. Casey Henry's out again. Nolan Hay is out again. Now, Henry was probably starting if he was healthy, 100% ready to go. Obviously, he's not. So, you know, that was really the only like projected starter, I would say. Because I think they would have gone with Newsome over Hay just because, you know, Newsome played pretty well. He's been getting the reps. But what this does is if you have an injury on the offensive line, which we know happens, guys get shaken up. You know, you like to stay with your five the whole game if you can, based on performance or health. But this on the interior, this causes some depth issues. You still have Boaz Stanley still there, so, and he's played. So you know, at guard or center, he could step in. You know, I think this puts Nick Sharp in play. Obviously, maybe Blake Franks. But the depth at this position is it at the offensive line in general is really interesting now. At tackle, you know, you got three guys: Thompson, Shivers, and Tree, and then, gosh, you know, I guess after that, Demola, as you do, the true freshman, maybe Blake Franks at tackle. So it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully they don't have any. I mean, you know, I'm not trying to jinx it or anything, but you got to ponder the what ifs, right? And so that could be a concern if in a what should be a very physical football game, you know, some of those guys go down. You know, you start. You know, it's surprising to say, but I mean, these are three guys that were at least in the top 10 offensive linemen. So it's 30% of your top two deep that's out for this game up front. And they've been struggling enough as it is. But I'll be interested to see who starts at left tackle tomorrow night. I'm kind of with everybody else. Like I've said, I like the Tree and Shivers combo. Nothing against Josiah Thompson. He's just, frankly, not played as well as he did last year as a true freshman so far this year. He's kind of struggling sometimes. You know, sometimes you play better when you sit for a while. Maybe sitting the second half against Kentucky helped him a little bit. So maybe he'll be back out there. I don't know. You know, the good news is Jatavius Shivers can play left or right. Tree can play left or right. I'm assuming Thompson probably could too in a pinch, but he struggled so much out at left. You know, you almost hate to look at him going on the other side, but we'll see. Believe it or not, Boaz Stanley can play tackle as well. He played it last year at Troy. So I don't think tackle is going to come into play as much as maybe guard could. But hopefully there's no injuries. I mean, you know, there were some good things that took place against Kentucky in the second half on the offensive line, just from an effort standpoint. I went back and took a look at the 9-minute drive everybody keeps talking about and kind of looked at it more closely, especially up front. And, you know, these guys still, they weren't getting a big push up front. They were better at holding their blocks, and Matt Fuller did a good job of finding space, but a lot of that drive was Lenoris just running out, making people miss, avoiding traffic. And Lenore Sellers is going to have to do that tomorrow night because there's going to be traffic. I mean, it's LSU's defense. They're going to send guys, try to get you on the ground. You got to break tackles, and you know, as some would say, Superman's got to wear his cape tomorrow night to make some of those amazing plays that we've seen from Lenore Sellers through the years, because they're going to come after him. They're going to come after him. I don't know if they'll spy him or not. That seemed to work for some teams. That's not really what LSU likes to do, but they got a kind of a versatile star on that defense in Harold Perkins. Maybe, we talked yesterday on the show. Maybe they line him up and say, "You got 16." That'd be a epic one. Very, very, not very often do you have epic one-on-one battles outside of the, like the receiver versus DB or in the trenches in football, like with a quarterback and a nickel, but or big nickel as they call him, with Perkins. But that would be interesting. Two big guys that are, playing kind of, Perkins doesn't look like a nickel. He looks like a linebacker, and they had him at DN for a while with his hand in the dirt. And Lenore Sellers, obviously his size is well documented. So that would be kind of an interesting game within the game, one-on-one matchup if it transpires. That's just speculation on my part. I think LSU is going to go out there and just run their defense. It's going to be up to Carolina to make things happen. But yeah, so that's the bad news. Now LSU, Paul Mbinga, offensive lineman, is doubtful, so another kind of shakeup there. Gabe Reelford is a backup defensive end. He is out. Aaron Anderson, their top wide receiver, is questionable. And if he can't really go, Barry and Brown, the Kentucky transfer, has some, catches this year. I think he's second on the team in catches with 24. We've seen him a lot through the years with Kentucky. And then Xavion Thomas, who's a Mississippi State transfer, is kind of a big play guy. None of these guys are huge. LSU, they got one big receiver, Nick Anderson, who came in from Oklahoma through the portal. And he's got a world of potential. So you hope he doesn't have a breakout game. But that's kind of how their receiving core is shaped up. Caden Durham is probable, and Delvin Breaux, their backup defensive tackle, who's a good player, is probable as well. Speaking of the Gamecocks stopping the LSU passing game, Judge Collier, according to Shane Beamer, good to go off the injury report. That's good. I think 18 snaps against Kentucky unofficially, getting his feet wet. His physicality could play a factor. But then you also hope he's not rusty if he's out there in man coverage against some of these faster guys that they have. But his physicality is going to be needed. LSU likes to get to the outside. I remember last year's game, they will try to get on the perimeter. Collier, I think, had a big tackle or two, O'Donnell Fortune, and even Kelvin Hunter got in the action, I think, against LSU last year. When they tried to run wide, it was tough. Of course, Kyle Kennard was out there, and it's been well documented how good he is, against the run. So LSU's probably going to try to get their run game going, especially with Caden Durham back. He went for 98 yards on 11 carries as a true freshman, 2 touchdowns in Columbia last year. So Judge Collier being back helps. I think that gives you some versatility, in the secondary with Cisse and Vakari Swain. And then Norwood's right there too, Jalewis Solomon, DeMarcus Leach, and on and on and on. So that's how the injury situation sets up. Now, one thing about the LSU passing game too, I wanted to kind of bring up. Bauer Sharp is their tight end, 15 receptions, 179 yards, 1 touchdown. They don't always, he's not this great blocker. He's kind of a guy they split out and sneakily throw the ball to, and he's been wide open a couple of times. So you're concerned a little bit. You're concerned, but then maybe not. If they split him out, with the way Carolina plays defense, Jelani Kilgore at nickel, or Cisse or whoever's in there at the nickel position, they're probably going to, they can match up with a guy like that. What you worry about is Fred Johnson and Justin J.O., Sean Murphy, those guys kind of getting lost. They're young. 2 of them are very young. I don't know if Justin made the trip down with Alabama last year as a true freshman or not. I'd have to check and see. He probably played if they did, because Alabama beat the bejesus out of them, 42-13. But so he may be used to that environment or not. But it's a big time environment, and they're going to have to play discipline because this Bauer Sharp guy is one of those guys. Reminds me a little bit Texas A&M. Oh gosh, when was it? It was Jimbo Fisher's first year. They won 26-23, 2018, and they had a tight end. They'd send down the scene, and it just killed Carolina's defense that day. That's who Bauer Sharp kind of reminds me of. Their other tight ends don't do much in the passing game. They're more blockers. But that's a matchup to watch. It's kind of my second off the radar key. Maybe nobody's talking about. First is D tackles, making sure Nussmeier can't sneak out of there, step up, and then somebody make sure you know where Bauer Sharp is, because that I can just see that happening. Um, with the nickel defense and stuff Carolina runs, you're not as susceptible to things like that. But if they start running the ball and you have to adjust, and that I could see something like that happen. And Nussmeier's very good at finding players like that. So there's kind of some keys, I guess, to the game. Final keys here as we wrap up the week on coffee. Carolina LSU 7:45 p.m. SEC Network down in Red Stick, Baton Rouge. Gamecocks have not won there since '94, and that's the only time they have beaten LSU since being a member of the SEC. They have, well, I hadn't played Texas but once, and that was back in the 50s. They hadn't played Texas as a member of the league. They've only played Oklahoma once and beat them. So they got one win over Oklahoma as an SEC opponent. So everybody that they've played more than once, they have the fewest number of wins since coming in the league in '92 against LSU. Hadn't played a ton, but boy, they've struggled down there like just about everybody else. I was trying to think today who goes in besides Alabama, which it's interesting because it's historically, for whatever reason, University of Alabama does really well in Baton Rouge. Games usually at night. It's just weird. It's one of those crazy things where Alabama can go into Baton Rouge and win. But they're about the only ones that have solved it since Nick Saban took over back in the turn of the century in LSU, kind of revitalized their program. Good teams go down there and lose. Ole Miss went down there and lost last year. I wouldn't, pound for pound, player for player last season. I think Ole Miss was the better team, but they went down there and lost. So it gets difficult in Baton Rouge for a lot of teams, but it's been especially tough for Carolina because they haven't caught a break down there. And like I said, I think there's some. I'm going to go through the matchups in a second. I don't know that this is not this lopsided game roster wise or team wise, performance wise. Heading in, when you look at the body of work this year, you look at how the teams match up. This is not a game that you look at and go, my goodness, if they can keep it close, it's a miracle. Um, when you kind of dig in now, there's some ifs. If things don't change on offense, if it's the same old, it's going to be a long night. And that has nothing to do with how the rosters compare or the capability. That has to do with in-game happenings and outcomes, which is what decides game scenarios. And I always say that and things like that. Um, so, but I've seen it before. I mean, 2020 was a one where Carolina went to Baton Rouge, thought they had a shot. 2012 was one. '07, maybe not. Uh, Carolina obviously was the third year of Steve Spurrier. Carolina was off to a fantastic start, but that LSU team won the national championship. They were a little too good for Carolina that day. I think Jasper Brinkley got hurt in that game too. So that was a 28-16 game in the afternoon on CBS. But other than that, it's just been difficult, going down to LSU. But it's difficult for everybody. I remember Mississippi State won there when Dak Prescott was the quarterback, and man, it was like first time in forever. It was like a miracle. So, Everybody struggles down there, it seems. Uh, and that's really why I think I'm going to pick LSU to win the game, just for the sake of being honest here. And, maybe sometimes when you don't pick the Gamecocks, they play better. Maybe it's a superstition thing, but, I, you know, going down there, that's why I would pick what I picked. If I wasn't, if LSU was coming to Columbia, I don't know that I would. I think I'd probably pick Carolina at home with this one, even with some of the issues that the Gamecocks have had. And again, this game's completely about issues and who fixed their issues during the bye week. The team that fixed them and addressed them the best is probably going to win the game. If they both fixed them and it's a tight one, the home team obviously has the advantage usually in those scenarios. If neither team fixed them, home team has the advantage in the scenarios. But if there's a gap, that team's going to win. Like, in other words, LSU can't run the ball right now. But if they can suddenly run it on Saturday night, they're going to win the football game. Carolina's offense has been clunky and they haven't been able to block and they haven't run many plays. But if they can fix that, run the ball, some make plays downfield. Lenore Sellers plays really, really well, and they stay on the field. Carolina's going to win the game. That's just provided LSU doesn't match it or whatever. But the matchups, and like I always say here on Coffee on Fridays before a game, there's two different types of matchups. You always see it. You see it in the newspaper. Who the advantage, O line advantage, D line advantage. So there's two types. There's you know who has the better offensive line, who has the better tight end group, who has the better, quarterback, coming into the game. But then you also have the actual matchups, which I think are more important. South Carolina run offense versus LSU run defense, that kind of thing. So here's what I came up with, and this is the first group of these comparisons is going to be, just straight up who has the better whatever. So we'll start with special teams. I'm going to go with South Carolina, 55%. All these are on a 100-point scale, so plus 10 there. Quarterback, and this is because of Nussmeier not, I don't think it's fair, and I've said this week, for folks to sit there and talk about Lenore Sellers being disappointed, and this is more the national folks than folks around here. I think if Gamecock fans and observers and analysts have criticisms, it's because the offense has been so disjointed and not good and hadn't run very many plays that when Sellers inevitably makes a mistake, which all quarterbacks do, every one of them, even the good John Mateer, John Mateer, who probably sounds like he's going to play tomorrow against Texas. He makes mistakes too, but Oklahoma's had opportunities. When you don't have a lot of opportunities, those mistakes get magnified, like the Missouri thing where he didn't throw it away, or the pick against Vandy early, that kind of thing. And, it's unfair to sit there and say, oh, he's been struggling just looking at a stat box. I will say this. Nussmeier actually has been struggling. If you watch it's just something's off, whether that's health related or not. Who knows? Hopefully Glenn Gilbo comes on from Tiger Rag today and gives his perspective on it. Because I don't know. Some folks believe that, he's actually really hurt and that we'll probably see backup Michael Van Buren Saturday night. I hope they don't. I like Van Buren. I think he could be very problematic. And if he plays, that means Nussmeier is to the point where he just can't go. I'd almost rather have a off, kind of off Garrett Nussmeier playing through an injury that may pop up every now and then than to have to play Van Buren, who's in his second year in the SEC. He started a bunch of games, learned a lot of lessons last year at Mississippi State. That's just me. That's just me. Maybe it's the ghost of TJ Finley. Y'all remember him? I think he's on his seventh school now, but he looked like a Heisman contender against the Gamecocks in 2020. So yeah, there you go. with that. So who has the better quarterback? I'm going South Carolina 54% +8. Tight end, slight edge to LSU 52% +4. Wide receiver, slight edge to LSU, assuming Anderson plays. I got LSU at 51% +2. Running back, got to go with LSU here. Even with Durham, he's probable by 8, 54%. And that's just because the Gamecock running backs, frankly, have left some yards on the field this year, all the way around. They need to play better as well, when the opportunity's there. Secondary, I keep going back and forth with this because LSU against Power Four opponents, and this stats come up on all shows, 277 yards passing per game. Now, I think it's an elite secondary. I think Monsieur Delaney's a fantastic player. Watch out for him. They intercepted DJ Lagway 5 times. They got that Pickett kid, the freshman, who's a 6'5" freak corner. He can make plays. Their safeties are kind of thumpers. Teams have been able to, I guess, throw the ball against them for yards, but they do intercept you. But I went LSU 51-49. With Judge Collier back, that's good. Carolina, there's no Nick Eamon back there, obviously, and he was obviously made a tremendous impact in the game last year and was robbed of a touchdown. But LSU plus 51-49. Linebacker, going to go with LSU. The Weeks brothers are really good. And then Perkins is technically like a nickel linebacker. I don't know if he'd go in secondary or not, but 51 or 52-48 there. D line, LSU close, 51-49. I could make a case for Carolina too in that department. And then O line, LSU struggled just like Carolina, but I'll still give them the advantage. They've actually protected and moved the ball, and a little better this year, but they've got some new starters and things like that. I mean, it's a big issue down there as well. So LSU plus 10 there, just because the South Carolina offensive line. I probably was going to go with about a +5, but just to be honest, after going back and really digging into that last drive against Kentucky, I just don't. They're going to have to get a lot better. South Carolina run offense versus LSU run defense, 70-30 LSU, a 40-point advantage, but LSU run O versus South Carolina run D, South Carolina 20-point advantage, 60%. And that's assuming the fundamentals don't escape them like Vandy and Missouri in the first drive against Kentucky. But outside of that, nobody's really run the ball that well. Held Kentucky to 108 net rushing yards in that football game, although Seth McGowan got his in that one. LSU passing offense versus Carolina pass defense. Just because Nussmeier and the weapons he has, LSU 55-45. South Carolina passing offense versus LSU pass D. Very close, 51-49 LSU. If they hadn't intercepted Lagway 5 times, I may have flipped that, but you got to watch out for the good ones back there and take advantage of what they give you. Carolina O-line versus LSU D-line, LSU 75-25. It's just how it is right now. Hopefully it gets better. And LSU O-line versus Carolina D-line, 65-35 Carolina, Carolina plus 30. Special teams, both categories, gave Carolina a plus 10, obviously. So you kind of look at some of these margins and, it's close when you look at the performance and talent that they have. It sounds weird to say when you're talking about roster and, a program that recruits annually in the top 10 versus a program that recruits annually in the top 20. But that's life in the SEC now. Everybody's kind of close. And so there's not this massive pound for pound talent advantage. I mean, the injury reports are just about the same. Some what ifs there. The bugaboo could be depth on the O line if you need it, if you're Carolina. But it's a game that on paper, just looking at the matchups and how they've played to date could go either way. But the question is, will they? And I hope, and this is getting into hope because we're going to end the week on a hopeful note. I'll say this about Mike Shula real quick. It, when Marcus Satterfield was here, and I keep saying over and over, the issues are not the same, even though the product looks like that. All you guys sometimes care about, and that's fine. You should, is the outcome. Well, it looks the same, too conservative, doesn't make sense, all that stuff, and that's fine. But the issues are different. I thought, I thought Marcus Satterfield hurt himself. Like, in other words, something would start working and then you'd hear practice, they'd change it all up and get away from what was working. And it was just and you saw it when he went to Nebraska too. It just did not make any sense. And it was about plays, not players, all that. That's not Mike Shula, his issue. What I think with Mike Shula is, I think that, when you have, and I've seen, all right, let me kind of get my thoughts here. I keep thinking about Steve Ensminger, who wasn't an NFL guy. He was a college guy, but Joe Brady got a lot of credit. Speaking of LSU, for the 2019 LSU team, and he sat up there in the press box and looked down there and fed Ensminger pass plays, but it was Ensminger calling it. And the year before, when Ed Orgeron brought him back, I think he got rid of that guy Matt Canada, who was at Pitt, who had the one good year at Pitt. They beat Clemson in 16, and LSU hired him, and he and Coach O did not get along at all. So Ensminger ended up taking over the offense. The offense got better, and he was opened it up a little bit, and he evolved. There's coaches that are one way and that evolve through time. And I think, and you've seen it in the NFL. I mean, everybody always likes to talk about Dowell Loggins being ranked when he was with the Bears, as the worst D coordinator or O coordinator in the NFL, 32 out of 32. Well, Kyle Shanahan was 31st. What's Kyle Shanahan doing now? He's one of the best in the NFL. So coaches evolve. I think when you come to college and start designing an offense and deciding what you're going to do, it's hard to get out of what you've always done, even at another level of football. I understand that, but what my hope is that there becomes a realization that college football is a lot more fun. You have the ability to go be creative and run it wide open and keep a defense off balance. You're not playing against, now I sound like a hypocrite because I've been talking about how the SEC's kind of all evenly matched talent wise. And that's true, but you don't have to be that complex. And I'm not saying Shula's complex, but you don't have to follow the run, pass rules, like where you're just kind of hoping to get to 3rd and 4 and call the perfect play and hoping it works. My hope is, because Shula is more open-minded and because he's more collaborative, that, maybe during the open week, he kind of takes the reins off and say, look, this is football. It's a game that he's coached at a high level his entire life, the son of Don Shula. And he just goes out there and says, hey, you know what? Well, this is, we got Lenore Sellers and we got some fast players that we can put in space, and, look at their defense. This is how we think they're going to play us. And if they don't play us this way, they play us the other way. We got this and this and this. And you got there and have fun. I mean, it didn't, that 9-minute drive, much has been made out of it. Maybe I'm making too much out of it. That didn't look like anybody was having fun, even though it was a positive thing and probably somewhat necessary for Matt Fuller in the run game. So hopefully that happens. I think Shula's got it in him. Like I said, the issues are different. With as far as the why and what. Although I agree with everybody that says it looks the same. I'll never forget that Florida game in 2022 when the game plan seemed to be to run it right into with Jaheim Bell right into the teeth of a defense with a 421-pound defensive tackle against a defense that hadn't really stopped anybody, and against a team that ran the ball right up Carolina's butt. And you knew they were going to. So you needed to get points because that defense was not that good at stopping teams like that. Crazy, right? I don't see that happening. I mean, Shula, to his credit, out at Missouri, they were giving him the long pass. He dialed up a bunch of passes. It's kind of more of a, I don't want to say by the book, formationally, I think they need to spread out a little bit. As far as play calling goes, it's maybe a little too by the book. There's a lot of stats out there about passing on first down in South Carolina where they're very successful when they do that, tendencies and things like that. And I think, that's kind of my hope, because there's a lot of talk about Shula out there. People are getting all over him and stuff and comparing him to Marcus Satterfield. And while I agree that the outcomes have looked similar, the issues are different, fundamentally different. Shula has a chance. Satterfield never. I mean, until they absolutely put training wheels on him. And then he ended up being a pretty good play caller, which is amazing to me why he went to Nebraska and said, nah, no thanks. I didn't learn anything. Shula is at the age where, I think he could evolve. And I hope to see it. If not, it won't happen. I'm not guaranteeing it will, but my hope is that happens because he's a good guy and a good recruiter, and players love him. He's Mike Shula, man. He's coached the game for a long time. So that's my hope, is that he's one of those guys that ends up evolving and saying, this is kind of fun. Like Steve Ensminger did at LSU. This team doesn't have all those receivers, and there's no Jamar Chase, and right now at least, maybe somebody in that freshman class ends up being that way. But it should be a little more fun than what it is, or look a little more fun. And fun is when you're moving the football. So we'll see what happens. All right, folks, don't forget the preview show later today. Four Quarter Friday kicks us off at 9. Preview show at 10. Sports talk this afternoon. We have live streamed high school games tonight on the Chief Sports app, South Carolina High School Football Scoreboard Show. You'll hear from me one more time on the tailgate show tomorrow. That's not really any kind of hard-hitting analysis or anything. And you'll hear from me, obviously, on the preview show today. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. This is J.C. Shurburtt with Coffee signing off. Holla at you soon.
JC and Mad Dog Mully on the Gamecock Show.